Hi everyone, and welcome back to another tutorial. Like I promised from my previous tutorial, I decided to make this crochet bralette, braided crochet bralette. This is not an original design. This was just an order that came in, so I just thought, you know what, it's summer and I'm sure some of you want to make some bikini sets just for the nice weather. So let's get started. All the materials used will be down in the description box below, so check them out. It's super simple to make. We are going to be working on the two bra cups separately, and then we'll later on attach those two and do the remaining braiding and the remaining back side of the bralette. So let's get right into it. So we are going to get started. Just for reference, I'm using a 3mm. This is the same size that I used for the bikini. So if you already made the bikini, I would suggest to use the same crochet hook and the same crochet yarn and just get yourself a set. That way you don't have to think about measurement and everything else in between. So now we're going to make a slip knot, and you are going to go ahead and chain a total of 13 chains. And this chain is the same foundation chain for every size. So whatever size you're making, you are going to go ahead and chain a total of 13 chains. So after our 13 chain, we are going to go into the second chain with a half double crochet stitch. I am using a half double crochet for the bralette, even though I used the double crochet for the bikini, but you can still use a double crochet for this pattern as well. So from there on, I'm going to go ahead and repeat one half double crochet into every stitch until I get to the very last stitch. So basically one until you get to the very end of the chain. So coming to the very end of the chain, at this point I should have a total of 11 half double crochet stitches, and right into that last chain I am going to insert one half double crochet, and that is going to be my 12th half double crochet stitch. But we are going to go back into that same chain with an additional 4 sets of half double crochet stitch. So in total we are going to have a total of 5 half double crochet right into that last very chain. Right into that last chain you're going to insert 5 half double crochet stitches. And you should have something like this. So now we are going to be working on the opposite side of this pattern. So basically where we're coming from, we're going to work on the opposite side. From there you're going to go ahead and go into the first chain or the first stitch on that side, and you're going to insert one half double crochet. You're going to go ahead and move to the next with one half double crochet, and just the same thing you did by inserting one half double crochet into the very first few stitches on the opposite side, that's the same thing you're going to do by inserting one half double crochet into every stitch until you get to the very end. So at the very end you should also have a total of 11 half double crochet stitches. So coming to the very end, you want to make sure that you're still repeating your stitches until you get to your very last stitch, and you should have something like this. So we basically just have this little tiny little little piece. This is what your work should look like. We are going to get started with the next row by chaining one and turn, and into that very first half double crochet stitch you are going to insert your first stitch. So the chain one is just a turning chain, by the way, guys. And into the next you're going to insert one half double crochet, and you're going to continue to insert one half double crochet until you have a total of 11 half double crochet stitches. So right there I have 2. I am going to continue to do 9 more until I have a total of 11 half double crochet stitches. And when I have a total of 11 stitches, into the next stitch I am going to go ahead and insert 2 half double crochet stitches. So right into that next stitch you are going to yarn over and insert a half double crochet, and you're going to go back into that same space with 1 more half double crochet. So that's an increase. Into the next stitch we are going to increase for the second time. So you're going to yarn over, insert a half double crochet into that stitch, and you're going to yarn over and insert another half double crochet into that same very stitch. From there on we are going to go into the next stitch with 3 half double crochet stitches all into the same space. So right there you're going to insert 1, 2, and the third one all into this same space. And we are going to go back to the opposite side, but you can grab a stitch marker and mark your second stitch, which is a center stitch in that set of 3 stitches. So now we are going to do the same thing we did on the opposite side. So if you guys remember carefully, we had 11 stitches, so we had 2 increase in the next 2 stitches before we have a set of 3. So we're going to repeat the same thing by going into this next stitch with 2 half double crochet stitch, and because we did have another increase, we're going to go back into the next with 2 half double crochet stitches, and from there on you should have a total of 11 stitches left. So in the next 11 stitches you are just going to insert 1 half double crochet until you get to the very end. This way you are basically doing the same exact thing you did on the left or right, I don't even know, but you're basically doing the same thing you did on the opposite side until you get to the very end of the second row. And this is what you should have after your second row. So we still have this little tiny piece. We are going to chain 1 and turn, and we are going to start row 3 by going into the very first stitch with our first half double crochet stitch, and then from there on we are going to do the same thing similar to what we did from the previous row by inserting 1 half double crochet until we have a total of 11 half double crochet stitches. So now I'm just going to continue this into the next 9 stitches until I have a total of 11. And this is what you should have after that. We are going to do an increase, so right into the next stitch you are going to insert 2 half double crochets into that same stitch. Into the next stitch you're going to insert 1 half double crochet, and you're going to continue to do that into the next 2 stitches. So basically 1 half double crochet in 3 stitches after your first increase, and right there we have 1 more stitch before a stitch marker. We are going to go into that stitch before the stitch marker with an increase of 2 half double crochets all into that same space. So from there on we are going to, you can tell that we have 11 stitches, we have 2 half double crochets into the 12th stitch, we have 3 stitches afterwards, 1 each, and then into the stitch right before a stitch marker we have another increase. So right there you're going to take off your stitch marker, and right into that next stitch you are going to insert 3 half double crochets all into the same space. So 1, 2, 3, and you're going to grab your stitch marker again and mark your center stitch, which is basically the second stitch in that set of 3 stitches. From there on we are going to repeat the same exact thing that we did on the opposite side. So right before our 3 half double crochets set, we have 2 half double crochets into the next stitch, and then we have 3 stitches and another increase. So right there I'm going to insert 2 half double crochets into that stitch, and right after that obviously I have 3 stitches, 3 single stitches into the next 3 stitches, 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to go into the next 3 stitches with 1 half double crochet stitch each, 2 and 3, and into the next I am going to insert 2 stitches all into that same space. And after this I have a total of 11 stitches left, so I'm just going to continue what I did from the beginning, which is 1 half double crochets into the next 11 stitch until I get to the very end of the row. So the first row 2 is similar to row 3, it's just a different increase step but you're going to repeat this until you get to the very end of this row. And you should have something like this. For the next row, which is row 4, you're going to chain 1 and turn, and right into your very first stitch you're going to insert 1 half double crochet, and of course you're going to repeat this into the next 10 stitches. So in total you're going to have 11 half double crochets, and then I'll see you guys and show you guys the next increase step. Yes, and now we are going to go into the next stitch with 2 half double crochet stitches, just the same thing we did for row 2 and row 3. So you're going to go into that same stitch with 2 stitches, and to the next you're going to go ahead and insert 1 half double crochet. So you're going to continue to insert 1 half double crochet until you get to the stitch marker. So right there you're going to insert 1 into the next stitch, 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 1, and into that stitch before your stitch marker you are going to insert 2 half double crochets. So you're going to do an increase right there, 2 half double crochets. Take off your stitch marker, and into your stitch marker stitch you're going to insert 3 half double crochets. So the set of 3, grab your stitch marker and mark your second stitch, just so you know exactly what your center stitch is. And we're going to repeat what we did on the opposite side. So into that next stitch you're going to insert 2 half double crochets. Into the next stitch we are going to go ahead and count how many stitches we have in between the increase. So right there we have a first increase and then a second increase, right? So how many stitches we have in between those increases is what you're going to count to do the same thing on the opposite side. So we have 1 2 3 4 5 6 stitches in between. So now we are going to go ahead and go into the next 6 stitches with 1 half double crochet stitch each. So 1 2 3 4 5 6, and into the next stitch you're going to do your second increase, which is 1 and 2 stitch all into that same space, and from there on you're going to go into the next 11 stitches with 1 half double crochet each, just so we can balance off what we did on the opposite side of the panel. And that is how you're going to continue to end off this row for row 4. So if you're making a size small, this is where you end and wait for the next step. But because I'm making a size medium, I need to go ahead and do 2 additional rows. And again, if you're making a size large, all you have to do is means you have to do 4 additional rows, because we are going to just increase 2 rows per size, and that is going to add at least an inches to your bralette. So for the next row I am going to do the same exact step. I'm going to make sure I increase after my 11th half double crochet stitch, and I'm going to make sure I increase again for the second time right before my stitch marker. And of course, whatever I do on one side, I am going to do the same exact step on the opposite side. So I'm going to do this for 2 more rows, and that will leave me with row 6, and then we can continue from there. So if you're making a size small, you are going to skip to row 7, and if you're making a size large, you are going to have more rows, which means my row 7 is probably going to be your row 9, and if you're making a size bigger, so on and so forth. So I'm going to repeat that. So right there you guys can see that I have a total of 6 rows, and this is what it looks like so far, which means mine looks bigger than a small, which is just the reason why I needed to do more rows. So now we're going to start the next row, which is going to be row 7, and that is going to be row 5 if you're making a small, and if you're making a large, that is going to be row 9. So to get started with row 7, you are going to chain 1 and turn, and right into your very first stitch you are going to go ahead and insert a half double crochet stitch. Into your very next stitch you are going to insert another half double crochet stitch, and you are going to continue to insert 1 half double crochet stitch until you get to the very top where your stitch marker is located. So continue up until you get to the very top. So you're not increasing again, we're not increasing again, we're just going to get to the very top of this panel where the stitch marker is. And when we get to the very top, we're going to remove our stitch marker, and right into that center stitch we are going to insert 3 after crochets all into that same space. So this is the only increasing we're doing. The 2 increasings that we were doing at the sides, we are going to stop doing that for the next few rows. So you're going to go back and mark that center stitch, and right from there, because we did not increase from the opposite side, which means we are not doing any increasing on this other side, so you're going to just continue to insert 1 after crochet into every stitch until you get to the very end. And you should have something like this. We are going to repeat row 7 for 1 more row, which is going to be row 8. So you're chaining 1 and turn, and you're going to go into the next stitches with after crochets until you get to your stitch marker, where you're going to insert 3 after crochets into that center stitch, and then you're going to mark the second stitch and go ahead and do 1 after crochet as well all around until you get to the very end. So that is basically what row 8 is, and again for size small, that is row 6. And we are going to start row 9 a little bit different from the previous row. So for row 9, you are going to go ahead and chain 1 as well and turn. So this is what is going to literally just give our bra a little curve, so it can curve a little. So you're going to chain 1, and into that very first stitch you're going to insert a after crochet, and you are going to go ahead and do one after crochet until you get to the very top where your stitch marker is. And when you get to where the stitch marker is, you are just going to go all around again to the opposite side with 1 after crochet. So this particular row does not involve any increasing. So we're basically just going to go ahead and insert 1 after crochet into every stitch, and from this point on you can take off your stitch marker because we are not increasing and you would not be needing any stitch marker from this point. And I ended up doing an additional 3 rows just for my size, but if you at that point you feel like 1 more row is fine and then you have your size, then it's fine. But I did a total of 4 of no increasing at all, which is basically 1 after crochet all around until I have a total of 4 rows. So we have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 up until row 12, and that is what the final one is. So I'm of course going to repeat the same exact thing for the opposite bralette, and then we can move to the next step with attachment and the rest of the pattern as well. And when you have both bralette, we are going to attach these 2 together with a slip knot. So I'm still going to just use my 3mm for this. So I'm just going to grab my 3mm and my working yarn. At this point you can also just deattach the yarn from both ends of the bralette, and we are going to attach those 2 at the center together. And you're going to go into that stitch, and then you're going to slip stitch, literally just slip stitch those 2, making sure you don't have a chain 1 in between each. So right before you slip stitch, you're going to make sure there's no chain 1. So basically just slip stitch right there and then secure that and cut off your yarn. And make sure you secure that stitch very well. From there on, we are going to start working on the side panels, and that is going to be the lace up thing that we will be going on at the back. From the inspo, guys, you can't really see the back panel, the way the back looks, but what I decided to do was just do few rows of single crochets just so I can have like a something that you can lace up at the back. But you can also just do whatever you want to do. So right there, I'm going to reattach my yarn on the side of the pattern of the panel, But first we are going to go and create a foundation, just a solid foundation, which is also going to be as a finishing around the edge of the around the top of the bralette. So you're going to chain one, and you're going to go ahead and insert one single crochet into every available space. So when I say every available space, I basically mean everywhere you can insert a stitch, that is where you're going to insert a stitch. But you want to make sure that you are not inserting more than one, sorry, stitch into any space, because then you will be increasing, and this is not what we're doing. We're just trying to get a single crochet across the very top of the panel of the bralette, so we can have a foundation for the next step. So right there you can just see that I'm carefully going to continue to insert one single crochet into every available space into this very first bralette, and then I'm going to make my way up until the next and continue to do the same exact step. And you should have something like this. So this is what your work should look like, and we are going to go ahead, I'm going to go ahead and just cut off those few yarns that I have lying around before we go to the next step. So now we are going to create a strap kind of that goes to the back. So I am going to go ahead and chain 21. You can make this longer if you want to, depending on the size that you're making. But if your bralette, I think because of the size of your bralette, you can also just chain 20 or maybe 25 instead if you're making a size bigger, and if you're making a size smaller, maybe 15. Right after, I am going to go into the second chain with my first single crochet, and I'm going to go ahead and repeat one single crochet until I get to the very end of this chain. I am using a single crochet for this part, but you can still use a half double crochet or a double crochet stitch. Honestly, it doesn't make a lot of difference. I just decided to use a single crochet just because. So I'm going to just continue to do this until I get to the very end of the chain that we just made, the 21 chains. Yes, and that'll leave me with a total of 20, because the extra one was just a turning chain and not an actual chain or an actual stitch. So coming to the very end of the chain, you're just still going to make sure that you're inserting one single crochet or whatever stitch you decide to use into every stitch. And now we are going to go ahead and go into that space with a slip stitch. So we're basically trying to create a single crochet while we are still creating a strap. So you can see right there that I did go into slip stitch into the body of the bralette, and then I did slip stitch into the stitch upwards, so I can have a second layer to the next row that I'm about to make with the single crochet. So you're just going to turn, and you are going to go into that very first stitch. So you want to keep the same amount of chains. So in my case, I chained a total of 21, but then I had a total of 20 single crochet stitches. So I want to keep that same 20 stitches. So now I'm going to just continue to single crochet into every stitch that I made from the previous row until I get to the very end, and we're just going to keep connecting this strap that we are making to the bralette as we go. So you're going to repeat this until you get to the very end. Chain one, turn, and continue to do a single crochet until you get back to the bralette where the bralette is. And so coming back to the bralette, which this is basically row 3, I am going to just insert a single crochet just like that, and right into that very last stitch you want to still go with your last single crochet. So I'm going to slip stitch into the chain above where I did ink. I don't know if you guys understand what I'm doing, but I'm basically slip stitching into a space on the bralette, and to start the next row I am going to go above the space on the bralette, and that is going to connect with the row 4, which is the next row, because you want to make sure that the way you're increasing the rows is the same way you're moving on your bralette. Hopefully it makes sense. If you guys have any questions, you can leave them down below. Hopefully you can just look, please just look and see what I'm doing, because I cannot find my right words to explain the entire thing. But I'm sure if you look, I'm going to put this on slow-mo so you can take your time to see exactly what is being done, and you can also learn from it. And that is the exact step I am going to continue until I have a total of 10 rows of single crochet, until it's honestly wide enough to your desired style. You can make this as wide as you want it to be, or you can even make this 4 rows or 2 rows, whatever. I did a total of 10, so you're going to just continue that until you have a total of 10 rows, and I'll show you guys what it looks like before I do the opposite side. So guys, this is what we are working with. I did a total of 10 rows again. Like I said, I'm just going to cut off my yarn and sew in that particular yarn, and I'm going to do the same exact thing on the opposite side. So remember, what we did was just chain the total of 21, and then we did go back into that chain with a single crochet, and then make sure that you slip stitch into your bralette, because that's the way you're going to end off the row and start off a new row. So you're going to do that until you have the same amount of rows, and then we are going to move to the next step. And when you have your 2 side panel complete, we of course need to make a strap hole. So right there I'm going to chain 4, and I'm going to skip 1 available space and go into the next available space with a slip stitch. So these little tiny holes we're about to make are going to be the same holes that the chain is going to go through, so we can lace up everything at the very end. So chain 4, skip a stitch or space, and then go into the next space with a single crochet, chain 4, skip a stitch, and then go into the next stitch with a single crochet. Obviously, depending on how wide this panel is for you, your side panel is, you're going to have more. I have 4, but you can have more depending on the size of your panel. So that is honestly what you're going to do on both sides, because obviously we need to, when we later on decide to lace this up, we will need the lace up pattern at both ends of the side panel. So you're going to just cut off that and sew in your loose ends if you have to, and make sure you do the same exact step on the opposite side. And this is what it should look like when it's complete. And now we are going to work on a braid pattern. So if you did make this yourself, the bralette, you already know how the pattern works. Super simple. So I'm just going to make a slip knot. I'm still using my 3mm for this, and we are going to get started by chaining 4. And after I chain 4, we are going to go ahead and create clusters. So you're going to yarn over, and right into the 4th chain you are going to go ahead and insert your crochet hook. So after you're going to grab your crochet hook, you should have 3 loops, but because we're creating clusters, you're going to go ahead and yarn over again, go back into that same stitch, grab the yarn and pull through. At this point you should have 5. You are going to yarn over again for the 2nd time, insert your crochet hook back into that very first stitch, and you're going to pull through, and this time you should have 7. In this clip I did use 3 clusters for the pattern, but for the top I ended up using a total of 5 clusters, which means I did go back into that same stitch with 2 more, and I ended up with a total of 13. And then from there on you're going to chain 1 and turn, and this is just a difference in size, so it's the same exact pattern. If you want your braids to be bigger, you're just going to have more clusters. So right there I'm going to yarn over again and go back into that same stitch, the same stitch where we inserted, and then I'm going to do the same thing. So if you decide to do 5 clusters, you're going to go ahead and do another yarn over for 5 times, and that is going to give you the same size. But because I am doing 3 in this clip, I am just going to yarn over and pull through, and right there now it looks funny, but after a few rows you see exactly what we're working with. So you're going to chain 1, and then you're going to chain 1 and turn. So right into that space in between each clusters we have a chain 1 space, so that is the space where we're going to continue to work the next cluster. So you're going to yarn over, go into that space, and you're going to pull through, yarn over, go into that same space, pull through, yarn over, go into the same space and pull through, yarn over and pull through again. From there on you are going to go ahead and chain 1 again. These are the size differences, so that is a 3 cluster while the one I just showed you guys is a 5, but I ended up using 5, but then in the clip I'm showing you guys how to make 3 the size of 3. So you're going to yarn over and do that again, 2, and I'm going to go right there again for the 3rd time, 3, and right after I'm going to yarn over and pull through, and I'm going to chain, yarn over and pull through again. So you're going to still go open and turn, and then you're going to open the second space and do the same thing, just the same exact step you just did. Yarn over and go through, yarn over and pull through, chain 1, yarn over and go back into that thing and create your next braid cluster on the opposite side. Super simple, guys. That is what you're going to repeat until it's long enough to go around your bralette, to go around your neck. You guys already see what the inspo looks like. The braid goes all around your bralette, on both sides of the bralette, and you also need to have a strap that is long enough for the neck, so you have to do a lot of braids. And this is where we get to the serious part. We are now going to attach this braided panel to our bralette. Again, you guys do see what it looks like already, and again, when it comes to how much braids you will be needing, that depends on the size that you're making. That honestly depends on the size you're making. So you're going to have to go back and check and see how long you have to make your braids to be eventually. So right there I'm just taking my time to go around the bralette just so I have an idea of what the vision is going to be, so I know. What I wanted to mention is you have to exactly know how many you'll be needing for your strap, because what the same amount you have on one strap is the same amount you're going to have on the other strap. When it comes to around the bralette, you can't really tell. I can't really give you guys an exact figure of how many braids I actually add for that, but then for the straps I did 15 on each side. So on the left 15, on the right 15, and then I made sure that I have enough on the center to go around. What I'll suggest you do is just make enough, but then you want to make sure when you're starting, wherever you start, you're going to use the start end of the braids. So again, when you get to the very end, if the end is too small, it's too short, you can go ahead and increase the amount of braids you have, and if it's too long, you can go ahead and reduce. But if you do this the other way around, you won't be able to readjust that. So that's what I'll suggest. So right there you can see that that is my starting point, so I'm going to make sure I use that to start sewing everything together. Right there you can see that I just counted 15 braids, and that is going to be where the strap is, and on the 16th is where I'm going to start attaching to the bralette, and that is what I'm going to continue just the same way you see me wrapping this around. That's the same thing I'm going to continue to do until I get to the opposite side, and I want to make sure when I get to the very end I have an additional 15 braids left so it can balance off the opposite strap. Hopefully it makes sense. So at this point you can grab your needle and we are going to start sewing the braids on the bralette. So get your needle ready, and I like to just make one string. So I don't like to double my string when I'm sewing, again just because I feel like using just one string is going to make it easy for the yarn to go through the braids and go through your stitches, so you don't have to, so you won't see the stitches. So I like to just make a knot on one end of the yarn, and then the other end is going to be without the knot. So right there I'm just going to make sure I have a secure knot before I start sewing everything down, so when I start I would not have anything going through, because if your knot is not big enough it might actually pass through your stitches and you don't want that. So right there already I have everything aligned, so this is going to be super simple. So when it comes to sewing the braids, you're sewing the braids the exact same way you would sew anything. That's just the same exact method that you're going to use for this. So you're going to pass your yarn, you want to make sure that the knot is going to be inwards, so you're passing your yarn from in out, and then you're going to pull that through. And then when it comes to sewing, you just want to make sure that you're going back into that very first stitch, because again the very first stitch has to be super secure before you start moving downwards. And then I like to go back into that same space again with few more stitches. So right there you can see that I'm moving as I go with my stitches, but from here on all I'm going to do is I'm not going to go in exactly, I'm going to go through the front and loop my needle to the through the back, exactly what I was wanting to say. So I'm going through the back, and then I'm making sure my needle comes to the front. This way I don't have to turn my project as I go, so I can just easily work the needle. So again, go through a stitch, pull, make sure your needle goes in and out. And so again, because you're using the same exact yarn and because you're using one string, you should not have an issue with your yarn showing, because again the yarn easily blends with the pattern already. So this is what I'm going to carefully, guys, when I say carefully, super carefully sew this all around. Take your time and sew this all around. Don't rush yourself. This is super simple to do. Take your time and sew. Make sure that your braids are actually secure all around your first bralette. So I'm gonna do that, and then I'll show you guys what it looks like. So this is what I am working with now. Again, like I said, you just want to carefully take your time and attach every braid to your bralette. Carefully sew every braid to your bralette all around. So right there, when it comes to the edge, you can just play around. You can see there I'm going to go into that, making sure that I go into that center, and then I'm going to wrap it around, because you want to make sure you have the curve going on before you make your way up until up to the second bralette and start sewing the braids on that second bralette. Again, you're just doing the same exact step, making sure you just attach every braid to every available space around the bralette until you get to the very top. And when you get to the very top to end of this particular sewing setting, you're just going to take your needle out, guys. Make sure you still go back into that very last stitch, and make sure your last stitch goes through the very top of your bralette on the opposite side as well before you take off the needle, because you want to make sure it's secure. So right there you can see that I'm going to go back into that same, around that same area with few more stitches with my crochet hook. So I'm going to grab my crochet hook and pass the yarn through, just to make sure that that last stitch is super secure, because if you don't secure that, there's a possibility, a very high possibility, that it might unravel. So please take your time and secure that. So just the same way you would sew in your loose ends, that's the same thing I'm going to do with this yarn before I cut it off, because I don't want to just cut it off, then I will have a blunt cut, which means it's going to unravel. There's a possibility it might unravel, so I'm just going to sew that in before I cut off the yarn and show you guys what the next step is. So the next step is basically us making a drawstring that is going to go through the crochet, the drawstring hole we created, right? Because we know for sure that the strap, this braided strap, cannot go through that. So right there I did go into the center, and I'm going to go ahead and chain 4, and after chaining 4 I am going to go ahead and yarn over twice, and I'm going to go back into that center with a treble crochet. So the chain 4 we just did is actually a treble crochet, so you're going to go ahead and insert a treble crochet right there, and right after you are going to turn, you're going to chain 4 and turn, or turn and chain 4, you can do both, and turn, and you're now going to go back into that yarn over twice and go back into that same hole with a treble crochet again, chain 4, turn, and go back into that same space with a treble crochet. So yarn over twice and go in there with a treble crochet. And this is honestly how you're going to make a long strap that is going to be used as a lace up. Usually I would use a chain, but I just thought this is also very cute. So instead of having a chain, you're going to have this pattern. So you're going to just chain 4, turn, and you're going to yarn over twice and go into that space with a treble crochet. So you're going to make this as long as you want. I ended up doing 20, was it 20 or 30? I ended up doing a total of 30 just because I did not want the straps, the drawstrings to fall, to be super long, because that's not what she wants. But if you want this to be long, you can make this as long as you want it to be. And of course you're going to repeat the same thing on the opposite braid strap, because obviously you need 2 of these to later on tie this at the very back. And when you have enough length and you want to seal this off, you're just going to cut off your yarn, and we are going to just go into that chain space with slip stitch. So you're slip stitching through the chain space, so you can just chain 1 again and tighten that yarn, and you can sew in the loose ends before you cut off the yarn, so you don't have a blunt cut which might unravel if you just cut it blunt. So you're just going to sew that in, and again, like I said, repeat the same exact step on the opposite strap to have 2, so we can later on lace that at the back. And you are just going to lace up your bralette just the way you want to, lace the sides up, the back, and then wear this and slay this to the fullest. This is out of my style. You guys know I never make bikini sets just because I don't wear them, and I don't want to make stuff that I do not wear, because what's the point of making something that I'm not gonna wear? But since the order came in, I just thought, you know what, I can still make this, and I'm sure there are people on here that would love to make a set, especially with the weather getting warmer and with summer being around the corner. This is just perfect. If you get to make yourself one, don't forget to tag me on Instagram, on Facebook, and on TikTok. All my social medias are going to be linked down in the description box below, so feel free to tag me, because I'd love to see what you guys make. I'd love to see the colors, I'd love to see the fitting, and I'd love to see your faces as well. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, as always, leave them down in the comment, and I'll make time to answer your questions whenever I'm available, because these days I'm so busy, but I'll make time to answer your questions. I love you guys so much, and I'll see you guys next week for my next week's tutorial. Take care, and I will see you next week. Bye bye.